The Sleep Clinic. Prologue: The Bruises. The first bruise appeared on a Tuesday morning. Daniel Voss found it on the inside of his left forearm while standing in the shower. It was the size of a child's hand. 5 small purple marks curved around the underside of his arm, with a 6th darker impression near his wrist. Fingerprints. Daniel stared at them until the water ran cold. He had no memory of hurting himself. He lived alone. There was no one who could have grabbed him. He turned his arm beneath the bathroom light, watching the bruises disappear and reappear beneath the steam. Then he noticed the dirt beneath his fingernails. Not much. Just a thin black crescent. Daniel worked in an office. He hadn't touched soil in weeks. He scrubbed his hands until the skin reddened. That night, he put a chair beneath his bedroom doorknob. It made him feel ridiculous. It also didn't work. At 3:17 in the morning, Daniel woke standing in his kitchen. He was barefoot. The refrigerator door was open. The kitchen was freezing. Daniel stared at the bright white interior. He couldn't remember getting out of bed. He couldn't remember walking downstairs. He looked at the digital clock on the microwave. 3:17. He closed the refrigerator. Then he noticed the blood. A thin line ran from the bottom of his right foot across the kitchen floor. Daniel lifted his foot. There was a small cut beneath his heel. He followed the blood trail backward. It ended at the back door. The door was locked. The deadbolt was still engaged. Daniel stood there for several seconds. Then he heard something upstairs. A child's voice. Very faint. Daniel. He froze. His childhood home had been demolished 11 years earlier. There had been no child in his house. He climbed the stairs. Nothing was there. But at the end of the hallway, his bedroom door was open. Daniel had closed it before going to sleep. Inside, his bed was empty. The chair he'd placed beneath the doorknob was still there. He hadn't left through the door. He hadn't left through the window. And yet he had been downstairs. Daniel didn't sleep again that night. 3 weeks later, he checked himself into the Meridian Sleep Institute. Chapter 1: Meridian. The clinic looked less like a hospital than a hotel that had forgotten how to be welcoming. 4 stories of gray concrete. Narrow windows. A glass entrance beneath a sign. Meridian Sleep Institute. Daniel parked beneath a dead oak tree. He sat in his car for nearly 10 minutes. Then he went inside. The receptionist was a woman named Elise. She smiled when Daniel gave her his name. Mr. Voss. Yes. You're here for the overnight polysomnography? 3 nights. She checked something on her computer. That's right. Daniel hesitated. And the sleepwalking? Her smile faded slightly. That's what Dr. Mercer will evaluate. I've been waking up places. Places. My kitchen. The basement. Once outside. Outside. I woke up standing beside my car. Elise typed something. Any injuries? Daniel pulled up his sleeve. The bruises had faded. Mostly. These. She looked. Do you know how you got them? No. She nodded. That's why you're here. Daniel almost laughed. Instead, he signed the forms. Dr. Adrian Mercer was in his late 50s, thin and almost unnaturally still. He had the manner of someone who listened not merely to what people said, but to what they were trying not to say. Tell me about the episodes. Daniel did. Everything. The kitchen. The blood. The locked door. The voice. Mercer didn't interrupt. When Daniel finished, Mercer folded his hands. Do you remember dreaming? No. Any recurring dreams? No. Any childhood trauma? Daniel looked at him. Why? Because sleepwalking can sometimes involve unresolved memories. I don't sleepwalk. Mercer smiled faintly. You've just described sleepwalking. No. Daniel shook his head. When I'm awake, I know where I am. Yes. When I'm asleep, I don't know where I am. Usually. That's not what this feels like. Mercer leaned forward. What does it feel like? Daniel swallowed. It feels like I'm waking up somewhere that shouldn't exist. For the first time, Mercer looked genuinely interested. Where? I don't know. Then we'll find out. Chapter 2, Night 1. They attached 23 electrodes to Daniel's scalp. 2 beneath his chin. 4 around his eyes. Sensors on his chest. Bands around his rib cage. Pulse monitor. A microphone. And 3 infrared cameras. 1 above the bed. 1 facing the door. 1 in the corner. The technician explained everything. The cameras are infrared. You won't notice them. Good. We record continuously. Daniel looked toward the ceiling. Even if I'm asleep? Especially then. She smiled. Try to relax. The lights went out at 10:42. Daniel stared into darkness. He listened to the building. Ventilation. Pipes. An elevator somewhere below. Then silence. He thought about his house. His bruises. The child's voice. Daniel closed his eyes. At 2:11 a.m., Daniel sat upright. His eyes were open. He stared straight ahead. For nearly 30 seconds, he didn't move. Then he stood. Slowly. The camera recorded every movement. Daniel walked to the door. He opened it. He stepped into the hallway. He walked barefoot through the clinic. The infrared camera showed his body glowing pale white against the darkness. He passed the nurse's station. Turned left. Walked down a stairwell. Then another. Then another. He stopped at a door marked Archive. Authorized personnel only. Daniel raised his hand. He didn't open it. Instead, he whispered, Mom. The camera microphone barely captured the word. Daniel turned. He walked back upstairs. At 4:38, he returned to his room. He climbed into bed. At 6:14, he woke. He remembered nothing. Dr. Mercer showed him the footage that morning. Daniel watched himself leave the room. His face tightened. I don't remember this. I know. You followed me? Yes. Why didn't you wake me? Mercer paused. We wanted to see where you went. Daniel watched the screen. There was something deeply wrong about seeing yourself walk while asleep. Not frightening. Worse. Familiar. Mercer paused the video. Daniel stood beneath the archive sign. Why did I say, Mom? We don't know. Daniel stared at the frozen image. Can we go back? Mercer rewound. Daniel watched himself approach the door. Then something happened. He stopped. His head tilted slightly, as though listening. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. Wait. Mercer paused. What? Zoom in. The technician enlarged the image. Daniel's sleeping face filled the monitor. His eyes were open. But they weren't looking at the door. They were looking at something behind the camera. Daniel whispered. Who was I looking at? Mercer didn't answer. Chapter 3, The Second Night. Mercer changed the experiment. The second night, Daniel slept in a different room. Room 214. The room had no windows. No furniture except the bed. No personal belongings. At 11:03 p.m., Daniel fell asleep. At 1:46 a.m., he woke. At least that's what the camera showed. He sat up. Looked around. Then smiled. It was the first time he had smiled during an episode. He climbed out of bed, walked to the wall, and stood there for 19 minutes. Then he whispered, Don't cry. Mercer watched from the observation room. The technician beside him frowned. Who is he talking to? Mercer didn't answer. Daniel suddenly stepped backward. He turned. walked toward the door, stopped, and said, "I'll fix it." Then he opened the door. He walked through the clinic. But something was different. The hallway camera captured Daniel passing beneath the lights. For several frames, the hallway appeared to change. The walls became wood-paneled. The fluorescent lights became yellow ceiling lamps. The carpet became green. Then the image snapped back. The technician stared. What was that? Mercer replayed it. Again. Wood. Green carpet. Yellow lights. Modern clinic. Wood. Modern clinic. The transition lasted less than a second. Mercer stood. Get the equipment team. Why? Because we're going downstairs. Daniel continued walking. He reached the old section of the building. Meridian had been renovated several times. Parts of the original structure remained beneath it. Daniel stopped at an elevator. There was no elevator button. Yet the doors opened. Inside was a brass control panel. Mercer stared at the screen. That elevator hasn't existed since 1987. Daniel stepped inside. The doors closed. The camera went black. Chapter 4: The Bedroom. At 3:02 a.m., Daniel appeared on another camera. The image was grainy. The room was dark. There was wallpaper covered in faded blue stars. A small wooden bed sat against the wall. A toy chest rested beneath a window. A plastic dinosaur lay on the floor. Daniel walked into frame. He stopped. He looked at the bed and began to cry. Mercer leaned toward the monitor. There was a child sleeping beneath the blankets. A little boy, maybe 6 years old. Daniel approached the bed. He knelt. He reached out. Stopped. Then whispered, "Daniel." The technician covered her mouth. Mercer didn't move. The boy shifted beneath the blankets. Daniel sat beside him. He watched the child sleep. For hours. At 5:51 a.m., Daniel stood. He touched the boy's forehead. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." The screen went black. At 6:02, Daniel woke in room 214. He screamed. Mercer entered immediately. Daniel tore the sensors from his chest. "Where was I?" Mercer closed the door. "Daniel. Where was I?" "We don't know. That was my room." "What?" "My bedroom." Mercer stared at him. "The bedroom on the footage." "I know." Daniel was shaking. "I know that room." He pointed toward the monitor. "That wallpaper." Mercer said nothing. "My mother painted stars on that wall." "Where?" "At our old house." "When?" Daniel stared at him. 30 years ago. Chapter 5: The Photograph. Mercer brought Daniel into the examination room. He placed a photograph on the table. Daniel looked at it. His face went white. It showed a house. 2 stories. White siding. A maple tree in front. A porch with a broken railing. Daniel knew it immediately. "My house." "Your childhood home?" "Yes." Mercer placed another photograph beside it. A bedroom. Blue star wallpaper. The same wooden bed. The same toy chest. Daniel touched the photograph. "Where did you get these?" "Your medical records." Daniel looked up. "No." Mercer shook his head. "We received them with your intake paperwork. I never gave you these." Mercer slid another photograph forward. It showed a little boy sitting on the floor. Daniel recognized himself. 6 years old. Behind him was the star wallpaper, and standing in the doorway was his father. But his father wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at something outside the frame. Daniel whispered, "My father died when I was 17. Mercer nodded. "Yes." Daniel turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. A date. October 14th, 1993. And beneath it, he came again last night. Daniel looked up. Who? Mercer didn't answer. Chapter 6, Going Backward. Mercer had spent 30 years studying sleep. He believed dreams were constructions, memory fragments, emotion, neurological noise. The brain did not travel. It reconstructed. That was the rule. But Daniel was violating it. Not physically. Something stranger. Every episode moved farther into the past. Night 1. The clinic's old archive. Night 2. The house. The next night, Daniel was monitored continuously. At 12:34 a.m., he left his bed. He walked into the hallway. The clinic changed around him. This time, the cameras recorded it clearly. The walls became wallpaper. The lights became lamps. The floorboards creaked. Daniel walked down a hallway that hadn't existed in decades. He opened a door. Inside was a kitchen. A woman stood at the sink. She was young. Daniel stopped. Mom! The woman turned. She couldn't see him. She continued washing dishes. Daniel watched her. Then he began to sob. Mercer watched from the observation room. The technician whispered, "Is she real?" Mercer said, "No." But he wasn't certain. The woman suddenly stopped. She turned toward the camera. Not Daniel. The camera. Her face changed. She looked terrified. Then she whispered, "He's here." The video cut to static. Chapter 7, The Rule. They stopped the study. Mercer told Daniel to go home. Daniel refused. "I need to know what happens. That's exactly what concerns me. What happens if I keep going?" Mercer stared at him. "I don't know. You said I'm moving backward. Your behavior suggests that. How far?" Mercer didn't answer. Daniel understood. "All the way." "We don't know." "Back to what?" Mercer finally said, "Possibly the night everything began." Daniel's mouth went dry. "What began?" Mercer looked at the photograph. The one of Daniel as a child. "You're sleepwalking." Daniel stared at him. "I never sleepwalked as a kid." Mercer pointed to the photograph. "Look at your eyes." Daniel did. The child in the photograph wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking toward the bedroom doorway. The same direction his father had been looking. The same direction Daniel had been looking during the clinic footage. Daniel whispered, "What was in that doorway?" Mercer said, "I think you already know." Chapter 8, The Doorway. That night Daniel returned to the clinic voluntarily. He lay down. No medication. No restraints. No attempt to stop him. He wanted to see. At 1:09 a.m. he fell asleep. At 1:12 he sat up. His eyes opened. He smiled. Then he walked. The clinic vanished. The childhood house appeared. The hallway. The blue stars. The bedroom. Daniel entered. His younger self was sleeping, 6 years old. Small. Vulnerable. Daniel stood beside the bed. He stared down at himself. Then he heard something behind him. A floorboard creaked. Daniel slowly turned. The bedroom doorway was empty. He looked back at the child. The child opened his eyes. Daniel froze. The boy stared directly at him. "You're late." Daniel couldn't breathe. "What?" The child sat up. "I've been waiting." Daniel stepped backward. "You can see me?" The child nodded. "You always come." Daniel shook his head. "No." "Yes." "How?" The boy looked toward the doorway. "Because you're me." Daniel followed his gaze. Something stood there. Tall. Thin. Almost human. But the head was wrong. Too large. the arms too long. His face was hidden in darkness. The boy whispered, "That's why you have to keep coming back." Daniel couldn't move. "What does it want?" The child looked at him. "It wants you to remember." Chapter 9, The Night. The memory returned all at once. Daniel remembered being 6. He remembered waking at 3:17. He remembered his father screaming downstairs. He remembered his mother crying. He remembered hiding beneath the blankets. He remembered the bedroom door opening. He remembered something entering. Not a monster. Not exactly. Person. A man. His father. Except his father had already been dead for 3 hours. Daniel watched the memory unfold. His father entered the room. Blood covered his shirt. He knelt beside the bed. He whispered, "Don't let it see you." Young Daniel had hidden his face. Then came the sound. 3 knocks. From inside the wall. Knock. 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 The child had looked up. The wall beside his bed moved. Not physically. Something beneath the wallpaper breathed. The blue stars stretched. The wall bulged. A hand pressed outward from inside it. Daniel remembered screaming. And then... nothing. Chapter 10, The Truth. Daniel woke violently. The clinic was dark. Every monitor was dead. The cameras had stopped. He tore himself from the bed and ran into the hallway. Mercer was standing there. "Where is it?" Mercer stared at him. "Where is what?" "The thing." Daniel grabbed him. "The thing in the bedroom." Mercer's face was pale. "You saw it?" "Yes." Mercer closed his eyes. Then he said, "I've seen it too." Daniel released him. "What?" Mercer walked toward the observation room. "You weren't the first patient." He opened a file cabinet. Inside were hundreds of case files. All sleep disorders. All patients with unexplained bruises. All reporting the same thing. Waking in places that didn't exist. Walking backward through memories. Watching themselves as children. Daniel looked at the dates. 1954. 1967. 1979. 1988. 2001. 2015. Every few years. Another patient. Another childhood bedroom. Another witness. Daniel whispered, "Why?" Mercer looked at him. "Because the clinic isn't treating the sleepwalking." He pointed toward the floor. "It's studying it." Daniel understood. "The clinic knows. We built the clinic because of it." "Because of what?" Mercer looked toward the dark hallway. "Something discovered that sleep isn't a direction." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" Mercer whispered, "Neither is time." Chapter 11, The Last Night. Daniel decided to go back. Not because he wanted to, because he realized he had already been going back. Every night. Every bruise. Every missing hour. Every strange place. He hadn't been searching for the thing. He had been following himself. Back through his own memories. Until he reached the beginning. At 3:17 a.m., Daniel closed his eyes. The clinic disappeared. His childhood bedroom returned. His younger self was awake. Waiting. "You're here." Daniel nodded. "What happens now?" The child pointed toward the doorway. The thing stood there. Closer. Daniel finally saw its face. It was his own. Older. Deformed by years. A face that looked like Daniel after decades of sleeplessness. The thing smiled. Daniel understood. It wasn't hunting him. It was him. A version of himself that had gone backward so many times that it had forgotten how to be human. Daniel whispered, "How many times?" The creature answered, "All of them." Daniel looked at the child. "Can I stop it?" The boy shook his head. "You already tried." When? The boy smiled sadly. Tomorrow. Epilogue 317. The Meridian Sleep Institute closed 6 months later. Officially, there had been a fire. The records were destroyed. The cameras were destroyed. The patients were transferred. Dr. Mercer disappeared. Daniel Voss was never found. But 3 years later, a new sleep clinic opened 2 states away. It had a modern name, modern equipment, modern cameras, modern doctors. On its first night of operation, a technician noticed something strange in the footage. The patient had gotten out of bed. He walked into the hallway. He stopped outside a child's room. The technician watched him stare through the glass. For hours. At 5:51 a.m., the patient leaned toward the sleeping child. He whispered something. The microphone barely caught it. "I'm sorry." The technician increased the volume. Static filled the room. Then another voice emerged. A child's voice. "You're late." The technician froze. Behind the sleeping patient, a figure appeared in the infrared image. Tall, thin, motionless. Watching. The technician turned toward the hallway. There was nobody there. She looked back at the monitor. The figure had moved closer. The sleeping child opened his eyes. He looked directly into the camera and smiled. The screen went black. At exactly 3:17 a.m., every clock in the building stopped. For 7 seconds. Then they all started again. Except one. The clock inside the child's bedroom. His hands had begun moving backward. And somewhere beneath the floorboards something knocked 3 times. Knock. Knock. Knock.
Flickering light on the sterile gray. Another night I can't escape this place. Then the star paper room starts to bloom, and the tall man waits inside the gloom. He doesn't speak, but his face is known. My own reflection aged and overthrown. The future's coming for the ghost. The future's coming for the ghost.